marrying non-Christians in the 2nd and 3rd century, very influential. When the Catholic Church got control of the Roman Empire, it began passing laws basically saying Christians could not marry non-Christians. The non-Christians had to convert. And this continued over the centuries. In the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, the Catholic Church specifically had a ruling that because, I don't remember the exact phrase, but something to the effect that because basically Christians were having, a lot of Christians were having sex with Jews and Muslims without knowing it.
We don't do that anymore.
You know, does that have anything to do with slavery?
Yeah, yes it does, because what they said was this was not supposed to happen. Jews and Muslims had to wear special clothing or distinctive emblems. The yellow Star of David that the Christians in Germany in the 1930s made Jews wear ultimately goes back to that Fourth Lateran Council ruling. That was why Jews over the centuries had to wear special clothing so that Christians could recognize them. And this is the same basis of these laws here. Christians could not marry Africans.
It seems like you got the horse before the court. I mean, it's like these things didn't cause these events.
It was Christian beliefs that required Christians not to marry non-Christians.
Let me ask you this, Bill. Isn't it possible that the pro-slavery people were just using as an excuse, because they wanted to maintain their property and their economy, using as an excuse calling these people infidels or pagans, when actually I think many of them were not? I mean, was it really a strong Christian belief that allowed them to maintain the slaves, or was that just an excuse?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, because obviously there's an economic factor and there's always a secular factor in what Christians did, enslaving pagans or slaughtering them, taking their land, etc. I don't deny there are secular factors. What I'm getting at is Christianity intensifies it. Remember that most of the slaves in the colonies in the 17th century were white. They were Europeans brought over as indentured servants, and that was what the Africans were brought over as. But over time, in theory, they would be released after 7 years. And that's what originally was done with Africans. But now you find in these laws and in the various enslavement laws and the court rulings that the discrimination was now, the distinction was being made specifically between Christians and pagans. And it goes back again. There's 2 centuries of theology.
Before we run out of time, Charlotte, we haven't heard a word from you.
No, well, I'm curious, since you are finding the materials, are religious scholars or social scholars weighing in on these things and drawing these same connections?
Yes, I didn't find this up on my own. I read in books. Like I said, here's a scholar here who did the study, a fairly prominent study back in the 1930s, and he says the legal basis for the enslavement of Africa. And there are other books. Let me give you one example here, and they're saying these things, and I'm backtracking, finding the copies of the court rulings and copies of other documents. For example, this is a book called Pro-Slavery, A History of the Defense of Slavery by Larry E. Tice. And this is basically his PhD thesis. He researched about 500 defenses of slavery written by 300 clergymen. And he said they only selected clergy because they wrote most of the defenses and were the most best educated people, most literate. Right. And he's just documenting what percentage were Catholics, what were Congregationalists, Episcopalian, Lutherans, etc. And it's
you didn't put too many black preachers in this, I guess.
I don't think there were any black before the Civil War.
But I presume it was the Southern clergymen who were justifying slavery. What about the clergy in the Union?
Well,
the people
I should have gotten to this and everything. I'm sorry I didn't. What he actually finds was, in doing the research in the background, up into the 1830s, most of the defenses of slavery were written by Northern clergymen. It wasn't until around the 1840s that the Southerns became predominant, and that's because they considered, for a long time, abolition was considered an atheist movement. It's relentless in their attacks on atheism, that abolitionists were atheists. They denied the Bible. The Bible is very pro-slavery.
Well, that's what happened in the civil rights movement. Civil rights workers were accused of being communists, and the word was, I'm going to say this out loud because it was one word, communist, nigger, loving Jew bastard. That was the one word that people used to call me. Was one label.
Used to call you because you were one of those civil rights people.
Civil rights. And Baptist preachers would get up there and preach.
Are you still?
I still am all but one of those things. Yes.
All right. You said
not a bastard.
Okay.
Well, this had an effect. Like I said, the Southern clergy. This is a book written in 1864 by a pro-union, anti-slavery.
Let me say this: we've got just a minute or two left, so go and do that as quickly as you can.
Called "The Church and the Rebellion" by Robert Livingston Stanton, and he was basically says he's trying to defend Christianity from the accusation that it was responsible for the war. He said, yes, a lot of churches were responsible. The southern churches and some northern churches were responsible for the Civil War. Secession was driven by the southern churches, by southern clergymen, and Christianity was not responsible. These were Christians, but they weren't real good Christians. And one of the leading prominent people in here is a New Orleans Presbyterian minister called Benjamin Morgan Palmer, who Louisiana was basically pro-union, anti-secession, or the anti-secession sentiment was stronger in Louisiana than the secession sentiment. Palmer is credited with giving this purple prose stem-winder speech here in New Orleans, in which he turned the tide of public favor in favor of secession. And this is in late 1860. So he's documenting and massively documents the role of the southern churches.
I have a question. It shows his picture in there. Did he remain a pastor of that church until 1902? I mean, was that just his lifespan? Palmer.
He was well after the war. I don't know how long. I haven't found that out. But
Bill, if some people who get the gist of what's in this book, this nice red-covered book, would like to buy a copy of it, how would they go about doing that?
Well, Amazon.com offers it, and there's a Rob Marks bookseller is a national seller of free thought books, and he has copies also. So Amazon.com would probably be the one for a lot of people. If you've got Rob Marks' catalog, or you will know that he has copies of it too.
And what is the cost at Amazon?
Amazon.com is $29.99.
Okay.
And this is a slightly cleaner version than this. I'm able to make a few fixes of.
I see, but for that price, they get a lot of pages.
About 600 pages almost, and about 100 plus essays and satires and commentary.
Well, let me say this: that there's more that we need to talk about. We will do a second show. I want to thank Lanny and Charlotte for being here with us, and Bill Sierichs, I certainly appreciate your being here, and we thank you folks who are watching our show and hope you will watch us again very soon.
Red looks good on you.